thank you very much for that welcome, and I'm sorry there's been a need to have two meetings. No, I'm not sorry actually, it just shows how many people are here who want to take part. And all over the country, we've now done more than 45 events in different places all over Britain. We're getting a massive turnout of people who want to see politics done differently and want our party to do things in a different way. It's an explosion of the democracy of the grassroots, wanting their views heard, wanting their policies developed, and wanting our party to lead to put those across. To everyone for inviting me today, and thank you to John Trickett, not just for what he said both in this hall and outside earlier today, but for the incredible energy, support and loyalty that he's given to our party over many years, and particularly in my case over the past year. John has been absolutely brilliant. John is always one to give advice, even if you don't want to hear it. John, thank you very much for everything you've said and all that you've done. And to me, there's a great honour in speaking in this incredible hall. This hall with the banners around it and the history that goes with it. This hall that shows the way in which the mining communities came together to campaign for safety, to campaign for decent wages, to campaign for justice. That went through the bitterness of the defeat in 1926 in the general strike, that went through the high point of gaining public ownership of the mining industry, that made sure the mining industry was strong and united. And of course it was that strength and that unity which the Tories always hated and always detested. It wasn't for any economic or rational reason that Margaret Thatcher and her government closed the pits in the 1980s. It was all about the politics of the power of the working class to decide the economic future. And of course, their problem is that you can never destroy that sense of unity and that spirit and that sense of our collective history. You see it here today. You see it in mining communities all over Britain, and you see it in bucket loads at the Durham Miners' Gala every year. And next year, we're all going to be at the Durham Miners' Gala in memory of the late great David Hopper. And now they come after the mine workers' pension scheme, now they're after all kinds of things. But I tell them this, we're going to stand together with those communities that haven't received the investment they should have received after the end of the strike, those places that have been left behind by Tory Britain. And also, what happened in Orgreave. What happened in Orgreave was the real-life experience for an awful lot of people. An awful lot of people saw what was really going on. That's why the first question I put to Theresa May as Prime Minister was, when are we going to have an open inquiry to ensure justice for Orgreave? And so outside, a few minutes ago, I was given a very nice gift. A t-shirt from the Orgreave campaign. And it's a meeting on Tuesday of the campaign with the government. I hope we'll get the result we need. But I tell you what, if we don't get the result we need, we'll be back there until we get the result we need. It's not an either-or situation. We're in a leadership campaign for the leader of the Labour Party, yes. That is obviously important. But it's also an issue about the direction in which we want our party and our movement to go, and fundamentally, the economic policies we want to follow. Everyone in this room, I'm sure, was totally devastated by the defeat of the general election in 2015. It was a terrible day. Because we know what the Tories would do. We've already had then 5 years of their austerity, and now we've had another year of it. And we've seen what's happened. But we have to be honest with ourselves. Two things. The banking crisis of 2008-9 was not caused by spending by local authorities. It was not caused by teachers, doctors, nurses. It was not caused by the unemployed. It was not caused by the homeless in Britain. It was caused by unregulated, greedy banks that put their money in what they thought were safe places to make a lot out of it, to direct our economy. And then you ask yourself, who's been asked to pay the price for this banking crisis? And I thought at the last general election we made a big mistake in that we were offering an economic strategy which did not completely oppose austerity, that was actually offering some level of cuts to carry on, and was offering to continue the public sector wage freeze, because we've been told by responsible economists this was the way forward. I put it this way, isn't there something deeply irresponsible in running an economy that you know is increasing poverty, that you know is increasing inequality, that you know is shortening the life expectancy and life chances of many of the most vulnerable within our society, and is deliberately leaving children in insecure, overcrowded accommodations because we're not investing enough in housing? Don't we need to turn the clock around and do things in a rather different way? That's why I was very pleased when John McConnell agreed to become the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, and the first thing John was asked to do was bring forward an alternative economic strategy, which he did, and outlined it at our party conference last year, when he used the words, austerity is a political choice, not an economic necessity. And if you make then there are consequences that follow from it, and the consequences you all know as well as I do on the life chances of so many people within our society. So what we're saying is we would have a very different economic strategy. An economic strategy of investment, an economic strategy of a national investment bank, an economic strategy that recognised the inequalities that exist across Britain have to be changed. Why is it that average incomes can be as much as 20% less from one region to the other? Why is it there's so little public sector capital investment going into the north and Yorkshire compared to other parts of the country? Why is it there are those levels of inequality? So we need a different strategy, one of investment, one of also saying we want the return on our investment. We, after all of us, have put a great deal of money into improving railway tracks between London and Glasgow, and London and Edinburgh, and London and Birmingham, and so on. I'm not against that. I'm in favour of investment in good quality railways. But I do think we should get the benefit of running the trains on them. Therefore, let's bring the railways companies back to the public area. We want an economic policy that is about investment, that is about creating jobs, and that is about decency in our society. And we want to measure our success as a government by how many fewer children are living in poverty, how many people are living longer lives, how many fewer people are sleeping on the streets, how better the healthcare is and better the educational achievements are of everybody else. Let's measure it in human terms. Measure it on the way we improve people's lifestyle and living standards. We also have to look very seriously at issues of rights at work and what modern Britain's employment patterns look like. That's why I asked Ian Lavery to undertake the work of Workplace 2020, which is about investigating what the current situation is, taking evidence and advice from unions, individuals, self-employed people, many others, about the kind of indignities they suffer and the inequalities they suffer. So that come 2020 or sooner, we're in a position to repeal the trade union laws that currently exist and put instead in place a positive right to join a trade union, a positive right to recognize. And then, if you're concerned about employment practices in modern Britain, you need look no further than Mike Ashley and Sport Direct and what they do. I pay tribute to Unite the Union for what it did in highlighting what was going on at Sport Direct at Shirebrook. I pay tribute to Dennis Skinner for pointing out in Parliament that once Shirebrook was a fully unionised pit, it's now a de-unionised, de-recognised, 0 hours contract centre of exploitation of some of the most vulnerable workers. So, we offer something very different on rights at work. 0 hours contracts are an absolute poison within our society. Nobody can predict what their income is going to be. They don't know whether they'll be able to get tax credits or not on the following week. They don't know if they're going to be able to pay their rent. And they just don't know what their future holds for them. So real equality and real security would be something very, very different under a Labour government of the policies that we are putting forward in this leadership contest for the Labour Party. Now, the issues of inequality go across lots of different services and lots of different jobs. I've just come from a meeting with a group of people from Barnsley Central Labour Party, with Dan Jarvis and councillors, looking at the issues of poverty across the town, across the city. The poverty brought about by low wages, by insecure jobs, the poverty brought about by insufficiency of housing, the poverty brought about by health inequalities in our society. And what's the Tory government answer? To hit the poorest areas of the country the hardest and hit the richest areas the least. And have the temerity to say they will decentralise the income from business rates to local authorities, knowing full well that will make the inequalities worse, not better. The function of national government is to reduce those inequalities and invest in the areas that need the most. So let's just look briefly at 3 areas: housing, education and health. I represent a constituency that in some ways you would say is very different to life in Yorkshire. Yes, at one level it is, but at another level it's exactly the same. It's poor children in overcrowded, insecure, inefficient, privately rented accommodation with massive energy bills. It's a massive council house waiting list that is very difficult to do much about while so little is being built. It is an out-of-control private sector market in owner occupation which only the richest can afford to move into. So we have a country in which housing is the most expensive, often in the private rented sector, the least energy efficient in the whole of Europe, and we have almost the highest age rate of people leaving their parental home because they can't find anywhere to live across the whole country. And we're spending in subsidies the private rented sector through housing benefit £9.5 billion every year in paying the excessive rents in the private rented sector. Is this really a very sensible use of public funds? Think some of that would have to be paid anyway for those people that are on a very low income, but not most of it. How much better off we'd be if instead we were investing that money in bricks, mortar, roofs, decent housing for everybody within our society. And so our policy is to develop council housing and build at least 500,000 council housing during the first term of an incoming Labour government. People say, well, you can't do that. I say, yes, you can. Yes, you can. Are we going to put money into subsidies into the private rented sector, or are we going to invest? When you invest, there's a virtuous circle. You create jobs in the building industry, you create jobs in all the industries that supply the building industry, and you get people better housed, and you get lower energy bills, and you get people healthier, and you get children doing better in school. What is there not to like about it? Look at the issues of health within our society. I am very, very proud that we have a National Health Service, healthcare free at the point of use for everybody. There's something very moving about going to a maternity unit in a hospital. A baby is born. They're obviously getting the care and affection and love and support that they need, but they're also getting a National Health Service number which gives them free healthcare for the rest of their life. That surely is one of the most precious gifts we can give to any child at birth. Don't let them destroy it. Don't let them take it away. And so, when they attack the junior doctors, when they attack the nurses by taking their bursaries away, when they underfund our health service through the excesses of the private finance initiative, which was sadly a big mistake that we made, when they come after our National Health Service, they do it with a purpose, because they then say, well, you can privatise this and privatise that and contract out this and contract out that. So instead of getting a team of people in a hospital all working together as an NHS team in a hospital, you've got X working for this company, Y working for another one, somebody working for somebody else. And the motive is very different. The motive is very different of a contract into running NHS services as opposed to NHS employees working together to deliver the service for all of us. I want our NHS with NHS employees on nationally agreed conditions and services, not the atomisation of the health service into 10,000 contracts for 1,000 different companies. Surely there is safety in that. And the crisis of mental health care in our society. A quarter of us in this hall, this wonderful hall, during our lifetime are going to face some kind of mental health stress or crisis. Some of us will get through it, will be helped, will be supported. Some of us will need help to get through it. Doctors and others and counsellors will help provide that. And some might even need to go into care to be supported for a while. Sadly, some won't. Some will be so put off by the language of abuse, the stigma, the macho culture, that some young men will take their own lives as a result of it. We can do two things. We can change the music and change the mood and respect and support those that are going through stress and mental health conditions in their lives, and properly fund with real parity of esteem the mental health services in our society so that nobody is forgotten and nobody is left behind and those people are supported. That surely is what civilization is about. Funding to look at issues of health inequality, because you can take a bus ride across any major city in Britain. The highest levels of life expectancy are usually in the leafy suburbs. The lowest levels are in the poorest places, often near the centre of town. Lower life expectancy is people doing dirty and dangerous jobs, such as working in the pits, building work, and many others. The NHS has to be funded to deal with that, but we also have to have the necessary and proper regulations that bring about safe working conditions and safety at work. I pay tribute to those that fought back against the dangers of asbestos for a very long time and drew attention to it when nobody really wanted to know. Those that campaigned to bring in the Health and Safety and Welfare at Work Act in the 1970s. And I utterly condemn our Tory government for underfunding and saying the whole place for central government is deregulation of those regulations that have protected people and must protect them in the future. There is a role for government in regulating health, regulating safety and regulating conditions to give protection to those who would be most exploited and therefore be the most vulnerable within our society. That's the difference between us and the Tories. And when you look at inequalities, you also have to look at what happens in education. I want all of our children, before they get to school, to get a chance to socialise together in nurseries, so that they grow up understanding each other. They have that lovely interaction that children really enjoy. This government really wants a lot of preschool to be a sort of marketplace, just as they want universities and colleges to be a marketplace. So what have they done? Taken away the educational maintenance allowance, which gave an opportunity for many youngsters to stay on, to do A-levels, go to college, and maybe go to university. What have they done? Lifted the cap on fees so that the debt level of students coming out of university now can be £50,000 or £60,000. What have they done but penalise people who wanted to seek an education, and finally cancel the last vestiges of maintenance grants for anyone going on to university. What they've done is destroyed the life chances of a whole generation of youngsters that had that dream of that kind of education. And they've destroyed the adult education services in so many parts of the country. And on top of that, they're now proposing, which seems to me kind of bizarre, it's not just back to the 50s, it's back to the 30s or goodness knows when, of the reintroduction of the 11 plus to bring in selectivity in education. I simply say this to Theresa May and the Tory government. If you watch children grow up together in a primary school, they develop together. They get to know each other, they have their ins and outs, their ups and downs, but they grow up together and they are part of the same community. If you say at the age of 11, 20% of you are special, 80% of you are not special, 20% of you will go to a selective grammar school, 80% of you won't, or maybe it's a different percentage in different parts of the country. What does that say to actually the majority of our young people? What does it do to them? What does it do to the cohesion of our community? So shouldn't we look at education slightly differently and say, we don't want every school to be a competitor to the school down the road. We do want local education authorities to create and develop that family of education with all the add-ons that can be there in music and sport and art and everything else. And not divide our children at 11, but make sure every one of them gets the best education, whatever their abilities are. I'm very, very proud of the work that Angela Rayner, our Shadow Secretary of State for Education, is doing on this. And we're going to be back on it on Monday in Parliament. We're not going to let them get away with this one, because it was us as a party that recognised the needs of all children by promoting comprehensive education that works for all children and develops stronger communities. But that really is what we're about. We're a party that wants to bring things into the community, not cut, close and privatise. In this campaign we put forward policies on lots of issues. We've put our 10 points out there on economy, on health, on education, on housing and culture, women's rights, disability rights, housing needs across the whole of the country. We've put all those out. We put them out there because it's important that we put forward those ideas, but it's also important we get feedback on it. Because democracy in our party and our movement has to be changed. No longer should it be an elite at the top speaking to an elite in business or universities or anywhere else that decides what our policies are. Surely democracy requires that every member, every active person, everyone that's interested has a point of view that can be very knowledgeable, very valuable, bring those ideas forward, and at the end of it, we have better policy, we have better ideas, more realistic about what we can do, and more likely to get public support and achievements for it. Do you know what? We've already had 12,000 submissions to the policy documents we've already put out, because people really are very interested. So, as part of this leadership campaign, Let it be a campaign about democracy within our party and democracy within our society, holding to account those that are in office, but giving opportunity for everybody to put a point of view forward on mental health, on housing, on education, on economy, and all of those issues. Bring those ideas together, and we're actually very much stronger as a result of it. So in this leadership campaign, we have been travelling all over the country. We have been holding events, yes, in areas that have been strong for Labour for a very long time, such as Barnsley. We've also been in other places. Last Saturday, I was in Ramsgate in North Kent, which is not a strong Labour area, sadly, but maybe it will be one day. In fact, UKIP have quite a lot of support there. But you know what? We called a rally on the seafront. We had live music. We had speakers from every community. We gave a message out there of the kind of inclusive society we want to live in. The kind of inclusive message that we're putting forward. And you know what? 3,000 people turned up on Ramsgate Seafront. Open air. There was no requirement for people to be there because they were party members or supporters. They were there because they wanted to be there, because they wanted to hear something different. So it is a campaign that brings lots of people together. And Tosh McDonald's in front of me with his Freedom Ride in front of him there. Tosh, stand up. Let people see your t-shirt. Lots of people come and join in on local campaigns, on national campaigns, because when you add up all these pressure groups and all these campaigns, health and housing, education, culture, working conditions, all those things begin to change and people realise that their demands are actually more or less in the same thing and the same direction. And so, to those members of the Labour Party who want an inclusive democratic party, thank you for everything that you do. And whilst I recognise that some members of Parliament have had one or two disagreements with John and me, and we won't go into any details in the privacy of this hall, I simply say to them this: come the 24th of September, this leadership campaign will be over. Come the 24th of September, the party members, all 500,000 of them, will have delivered a vote. So, it's not just me, we, all of us, not just want, we need and require our party to come together. So that when John speaks in Parliament, on behalf of all of us, challenging them on austerity, challenging them on inequality, injustice, for what they're doing in society, we're all there with him. He is speaking for all of us. Or Richard Bergen on justice, or John on all the many issues that John speaks on. Let's get behind them and get with them in doing that. And as we go forward, we challenge them on education, which I've just said. We challenge them on their economic strategy. We challenge them on what they're doing. That surely makes us all stronger. Now, it might be said that the media are very hostile to the Labour Party. Yes, that's very true. And indeed, an academic analysis shows that 84% of print media coverage over the past year has been either hostile or deeply hostile to the Labour Party, which means, the last time I looked, that a smaller proportion, like 16%, is potentially supportive. Sadly not. It's only 14% that is neutral and 2% that's supportive. I think those are the figures. So we need to be a bit of change there. But there are some areas you're not going to persuade very easily. But we've got our own ways of communicating. We've got our own ways of communicating. In the past, we did it through leaflets, we did it through public meetings, we did it by word of mouth, we did it by campaigning. We still do all of that. But we've also got social media. And so, if they won't say what we're doing, we can say what we're doing. And if this has been followed, as I expect it is, live stream on Facebook now. Hello Facebook, good luck to you. And all of you that are watching this, we also get a massive way of mobilising people, and young people in particular talk to each other on social media. That is the modern way of communicating. And in the last election, only 47% of young people bothered to vote, and that was of those that are registered. I tell you this, the excitement of the change in politics over the past year, I think will bring many, many more of them on board. Many, many more of them into our because what we're doing is offering an opportunity. We're offering an opportunity that you can go to college, you can get a real apprenticeship, you can end the disgraceful youth rate in a minimum wage, you can get a decent living wage, which is why I'm very pleased to say that one of the speakers at the party conference in 2 weeks' time is going to be the leader of the American campaign for a $15 an hour minimum wage for fast food workers, because we want to do the same here. And that going towards the election, we bring forward that sense of unity. I've been taught for many years that the economists of the world say, well, that sort of 1945 settlement, that was quite good, really. Yeah, you've got a health service, you've got a welfare state, you've got council housing, you've got pensions, you've got all those kind of things. But you know what? We can no longer afford it. They keep saying we can no longer afford it. I don't know how many of you got around to reading the Panama Papers, but it seems that plenty of people have spent an awful lot of time and energy and resources on not paying the taxes that are necessary to fund our public services. So those who think it's clever to avoid tax, I simply say this: one day you're going to be old. One day you might have a heart attack. One day you might need social care. One day your house might catch fire. One day you might be attacked in the street. At that point, you're going to be quite pleased that the rest of us paid for a national health service, paid for a fire service, paid for all the public services that you have. But it's also about what we give to the next generation. Why should we, this generation, be saying to those now in school and college that somewhere or other, sorry, you're not going to get the health service we had, you're not going to get this, you're not going to get that. Why? Why? Is it because we've become afraid to challenge the sort of neoliberal economics of the 1970s that Reagan and Thatcher foisted upon us? Or are we big enough and strong enough, now the largest socialist party anywhere in Europe, to challenge that economic narrative and instead develop an economy that works for all? Develop a strategy and idea that protects the rights that we've won, protects the human rights that we've won, the anti-discrimination legislation that we've won, and develops a society where all are included, and so nobody and no community is ever left behind. This hall was built by those that believed in unity in the mining industry. The mining union did all it could, and it taught us a lot about unity and solidarity. What we now need is that unity and that solidarity throughout our movement to challenge the idea that it's impossible to end inequality, to challenge the idea that inequality is somehow or other inevitable, to challenge the idea that somehow or other a child born to a poor household isn't as valuable as a child born to a rich household, to challenge the idea that we can't reach out to help those in times of distress and stress, such as those refugees going through such awful things around the world. Can we not bring in the traditions of our movement, the strengths of our movement, the values of our movement, put them out there, because they're basically decent, good human values. That is what will defeat injustice. That is what will defeat inequality. That is what will bring about real opportunities for everybody in our society. Thank you very much.